Welcome to Love and Guts podcast, where we take the most common gut health advice floating around online and put it under the microscope. I'm Linda Gripprich, gut health naturopath, and today we are diving into a favourite topic and one of the most misunderstood areas in gut health: probiotics. They are everywhere. They're in the supplement aisle, in your yogurt, on your Instagram feed. Every second wellness brand has a probiotic product promising to transform your gut health. And I think that's genuinely exciting because probiotics, when used correctly, are remarkable. They have enormous range of therapeutic applications, from IBS and constipation to anxiety, endometriosis, and even gestational diabetes prevention. But used correctly is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in that sentence. Because here's the thing. Most people are not using probiotics correctly, and it's not their fault. There's so much noise, so much marketing, and so many well-meaning but outdated recommendations out there. So today, we're busting the most common probiotic myths I see in my clinic and online. And by the end of this episode, you're going to understand probiotics at a level that most people, frankly, never do. Let's get into it. Before we get into the myths, let's make sure we're on the same page about what a probiotic actually is. The scientific definition is live microorganisms which, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit on the host, being us. Notice two things. First, they have to be live. Second, they have to be in adequate amounts. Both of these matter enormously, as you'll soon see. Probiotics are typically bacteria, most commonly from the genera Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. And they come in capsules, powders, tablets, lozenges, and fermented food products. Now, fermented foods, your yogurt, kombucha, sauerkraut, kefir, these are often lumped in with probiotics. And I want to address that specifically today because the reality is more nuanced than most people realize. All right, myth time. Myth 1. Probiotics permanently colonize your gut. This is probably the most fundamental misunderstanding about how probiotics actually work. Many people believe that I take a probiotic, the bacteria move in, set up shop, and now my gut is permanently populated with all these wonderful strains, like they've bought real estate in your intestines. That is not what happens. And the research is really clear on this. Very few externally supplied probiotic strains permanently take up residence in the human gut. In general, you cannot recolonize your gut with a probiotic supplement unless there is specific evidence for a particular strain permanently colonizing. It almost certainly won't. Probiotics are transient. They pass through your digestive system, surviving stomach acid and moving through the small intestine, spending time in the colon, and then they leave. They do not permanently move in. This sounds disappointing, but it's actually not, because the effects they produce while they're there can be profound and lasting. They interact with your immune system. They crowd out less friendly microbes. They produce compounds that change the gut environment and can support motility. All of that happens without them sticking around permanently. To maintain ongoing benefit, you generally need to keep taking the probiotic. When clients tell me, I tried probiotics but they stopped working, often what happens is they stopped taking them, and those transient effects faded. Probiotics are a therapeutic tool, not a one-time gut renovation. Myth 2. All probiotics are the same. A probiotic is a probiotic. This is the myth that makes me want to sit down with every supplement company marketing team for a very long conversation. Here's what you need to understand. Probiotic characteristics, including the health benefits they produce, are fundamentally strain specific. Let me explain what that means. Bacteria have 3 levels of identification: genus, species, and strain. Take Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG as an example. Lactobacillus is a genus, rhamnosus is the species, and GG is the strain. And that strain designation is where the clinical action lives. I love the analogy of dogs. All dogs are the same species, but a Chihuahua and a Labrador are wildly different in temperament, ability, and what they're suited for. Strains of bacteria work the same way. 2 strains within the exact same species can have completely different clinical effects. This is not a minor distinction. You absolutely cannot take research conducted on one strain and assume it applies to another, even if they share the same species name. A product containing Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, one of the most well-researched strains in the world, has documented benefits for certain conditions. A different Lactobacillus rhamnosus strain with no clinical evidence behind it is a completely different thing clinically. Same species, different strain, different therapeutic profile entirely. And here's the part that should concern every consumer. Even if you wanted to choose a probiotic by strain, you often can't because the information may not be on the label. A 2021 audit of over 500 probiotic products listed on the Australia's Therapeutic Goods Register found that not one of the public product summaries contained strain level information, just genus and species, which, as we've just established, tells you almost nothing clinically useful. Australia's regulatory framework has since begun to move toward strain level requirements, which is excellent, but it remains inconsistent, and for many products currently on the shelf, you still cannot reliably verify what strain you're actually getting. In clinical practice, the most important question I ask when assessing a probiotic is, what strain is this? And what is the evidence for this specific strain for this specific condition? That's a question worth asking, and the fact that it can be hard to answer from a label alone is exactly why navigating this space without guidance is so difficult. Myth 3. More strains in a bottle means it is more effective. Let's talk about the multi-strain obsession. You've seen these products. 18 strains, 30 strains, the numbers keep climbing, and the marketing implies that more equals better. It feels intuitive, more diversity, more coverage. Surely that's good for you, right? Not necessarily. Here's why. If a product contains 20 strains but there's no clinical evidence for most of them, or if each strain is present at such a low dose, then it's therapeutically meaningless. You're not getting a super probiotic, you might be getting an expensive placebo. What actually matters is having the right strain or strains at an adequate therapeutic dose with clinical evidence that they do what you're hoping for. A product with 2 well-researched, clinically validated strains at appropriate doses will often outperform a 20-strain product with minimal evidence behind it. More is not always more. Right is more. Myth 4. Don't take probiotics while you're on antibiotics. The antibiotics will just kill them. This is one I hear all the time, and it's the kind of advice that sounds logical but actually does people real harm. The thinking goes, antibiotics kill bacteria, so any probiotic bacteria you take at the same time will just get wiped out, so why bother? Here's what the evidence actually shows. And I want to be upfront with you about both the signal and the limitations, because this is an area where I think intellectual honesty matters. Multiple randomized controlled trials and meta-analyses have found that taking probiotics concurrently with antibiotics significantly reduces the risk of antibiotic-associated diarrhea. A 2024 multi-hospital RCT found that adults taking a combination of 2 fully characterized strains, Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG and Bifidobacterium longum BB536, had their rate of antibiotic-associated diarrhea nearly halved compared to placebo, 18% versus 31%. That's a meaningful clinical reduction. A 2021 meta-analysis published in BMJ Open, specifically in adults, pooled 42 studies and over 11,000 participants and found a 37% overall risk reduction with moderate quality evidence. The evidence is consistent, but I'll be honest, none of these studies are perfect. The meta-analyses pool research with different strains, different doses, different antibiotics, and different patient populations. Many of the included trials don't specify strains, which we know is important. What this body of evidence tells us is that there's a reliable signal. It doesn't yet tell us which specific strains work best at which doses for which antibiotics in which populations. That level of precision requires better designed strain-specific trials than we currently have. There's also an important nuance around what probiotics can and can't do in this context. A 2023 systematic review and meta-analyses published in BMC Medicine looked specifically at whether probiotic supplementation during antibiotic treatment helped maintain gut microbiome diversity, the richness and evenness of your microbial community. The finding was that probiotics were not found to be influential on microbiome diversity indices, but here's the critical limitation of that paper. And it's the same issue we see running through this whole episode. The included studies did not require or standardize by strain. Many didn't even identify strains at all, which, as we've already established, is clinically meaningless when it comes to predicting therapeutic effect. So what that meta-analysis actually tells us is that a heterogeneous, strain-unspecified collection of probiotic interventions did not produce a consistent signal on diversity indices. It cannot tell us what a well-chosen strain-specific probiotic at an adequate dose might do, because that question was never actually tested in the pooled data. We can't yet say whether the right strain at the right dose might produce a different result on diversity. What we can say is that currently, probiotics during antibiotics appear to reduce your symptom burden, the diarrhea, the gut disruption, but should not be relied upon as a complete microbiome restoration strategy. So where does that leave us practically? Taking a well-chosen probiotic during antibiotic treatment, separated from your antibiotic dose by at least 2 hours, is a reasonable, evidence-supported strategy for protecting your gut symptoms. The idea of avoiding probiotics altogether during antibiotic treatment is outdated advice that the evidence simply does not support. Myth 5. Take probiotics on an empty stomach. This one has been around for a long time, and you'll still find it on labels and in practitioners' recommendations. The reasoning was that stomach acid is lower in a fasted state, so more bacteria survive. But current evidence has moved on from this. In vitro research using validated digestion models has found that probiotic survival through the upper digestive tract is significantly better when taken with a meal, or up to 30 minutes before eating, particularly meals containing some fat or complex carbohydrates. A 2024 study using the standardized InfoGest 2.0 digestion model found survival rates of around 92% when taken with food, compared to under 80% with juice. A 2025 study specifically examining Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG found that taking it with or after a meal significantly improved bacterial viability compared to taking it on an empty stomach. The food essentially acts as a buffer, protecting the bacteria in transit. Some enteric-coated capsules are designed to survive regardless of when you take them, but as a general rule, the empty stomach instruction is outdated for most products. My recommendation is take your probiotic with breakfast or before your main meal. It's practical, easy to remember, and supported by the evidence. Myth 6. Eating fermented foods like kefir and kombucha is all you need to restore your gut after antibiotics. This one is so widespread, and I completely understand why people believe it. You finish a course of antibiotics, your gut feels wrecked, and someone says, eat lots of kefir and kombucha to recolonize. It sounds wonderful, but there are two important problems with this idea. First, fermented foods like kefir, kombucha, sauerkraut, and kimchi contain a diverse community of microbes, but those strains are variable, not well characterized, and change from batch to batch. They're not standardized therapeutic agents. For general gut health support and dietary diversity, they are genuinely wonderful, but for the specific purpose of re-inoculating a microbiome that's been disrupted by antibiotics, the evidence doesn't support that fermented foods can reliably do this. The second thing I want to address is a common assumption about supplements versus fermented foods, and it's more nuanced than you might expect. The food matrix that probiotics are delivered in can actually affect how well those bacteria survive to reach the colon. Research has shown that the buffering effect of dairy and grain-based foods can be protective in ways that capsules alone don't always replicate. Which means the delivery format matters more than most people realize. And this is important. Some products in the fermented food category do have genuine therapeutic evidence. Products like Valia, Activia, and Yakult contain specific, named, clinically validated strains, and those strains have their own evidence bases for specific conditions. These are not your average supermarket yogurt or batch kombucha. They work not because they're fermented foods, but because the specific validated strain inside them has documented clinical effects. The delivery vehicle, in this case, the yogurt or drink matrix, can actually help with bacterial survival, which is a bonus, but it's the strain doing the therapeutic work. So the real distinction here is not supplement versus fermented food. It's characterized, clinically validated strain versus uncharacterized variable microbial content. Standard kombucha, kefir, and supermarket yogurt with live cultures fall into the second category. Generally valuable for general gut health and dietary diversity, but not a reliable tool for re-inoculating a significantly disrupted microbiome. A product with a named validated strain, whether it comes in a capsule or a small bottle from the dairy aisle, is a different thing entirely. Myth 7. If you have a gut condition, you definitely need a probiotic. I want to end this myth-busting section with something that might surprise you. Coming from a practitioner who has just spent an episode talking about how powerful probiotics are. Probiotics are not always the answer, and in my clinical practice, I don't prescribe them to every client with a gut issue. Here's my honest take. When I am prescribing probiotics, they are always targeted. I'm choosing a specific strain for a specific purpose based on the clinical picture in front of me. I'm not reaching for a probiotic by default. And actually, the intervention I find myself recommending more frequently than probiotics is prebiotics. The scientific definition of a prebiotic is a substrate that is selectively utilized by host or microorganisms, conferring a health benefit. In practice, that means they are compounds, often types of dietary fiber, that feed and support the beneficial bacteria already living in your gut. For many of my clients, particularly those with dysbiosis or a generally depleted microbiome, that foundation work is more important than adding new strains from the outside. Prebiotics deserve their own episode, and I'll do a deep dive on them soon. But I wanted to flag it here because the assumption that gut health equals probiotics is one I push back on regularly. The right intervention depends entirely on what's actually going on in your gut. So let's bring it all together. Probiotics are generally powerful. The clinical applications are vast and the research is growing fast, but they are only powerful when used with precision. To recap what we've covered today, probiotics are transient, not permanent gut residents. Strain identity matters enormously, and for many probiotics on Australian shelves, that strain information still isn't always reliably disclosed on the label. More strains in a bottle do not mean more effective. Taking probiotics with antibiotics is not only fine, it's actually protective for gut symptoms, even if it's not a complete microbiome restoration strategy on its own. Take your probiotic with food, not on an empty stomach. Fermented foods are wonderful for general gut health, but they won't reliably restore a significantly disrupted microbiome. And probiotics are not the automatic answer to every gut condition. Targeted prescription and sometimes prebiotics first will serve you better. If you've been taking probiotics and not getting results, the first thing I'd look at is whether the strain you're using has actual clinical evidence for what you're trying to treat. That one shift can completely change your experience. If you want help navigating this, figuring out the right strain, the right dose, the right approach for your specific situation, this is exactly the kind of thing I work through with clients. You can find me at lindagripprich.com or book through the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening today. If this was useful, please share it with someone who's drowning in probiotic marketing and doesn't know what to believe, because there is genuinely a lot of noise out there and they deserve better information. I'll see you in the next episode.